Hello, I'm Liz Norman and I recruit with ENI for the insights profession, and I am very proud today to invite Sue Phillips, who is the global head of Ipsos Insight UU, which is the qualitative division of Ipsos. And my first question, Sue, is why UU? Why don't you say you're qualitative?
Oh, it's a great question, Liz. Thanks very much for asking me to be with you today. So there's a short story behind UU. So in the past, Ipsos acquired a company called Understanding Unlimited from the US. And so we had a name, if you like. And 10 years ago, when we combined with Synovate, we wanted to become much more serious about qualitative globally. And most qualitative researchers, as anyone who's a qualitative researcher listening will know, we prefer to work for something that's identifiable as opposed to being something very big. So small boutique is our natural home. And so we decided we needed a name. And so we took the Understanding Unlimited and made it into UU. So it's always a good question point that clients often ask. So we explain what it means. But it's also served us very well over the last 10 years, where we have seen massive changes in qualitative, which 10 years ago or 30 years ago when I started was all about focus groups and IDIs and individual interviews, whereas now it's a very different picture. And if you call yourself just qualitative, there is an association with those more traditional approaches. Whereas if you don't necessarily call yourself qualitative, you can perhaps be a lot more. So that's where it served us well.
Yeah, I mean, actually, one of the things I've been wondering about is almost the definition of qualitative as we enter this new world.
Yeah.
What does it really mean? That's a big question, though. I don't know if it's fair to suddenly launch that on you, but it sort of does lead into that, doesn't it?
Yes.
How qualitative. I don't know. What do you think qualitative means?
Well, I always associate qualitative with a few things. So an in-depth understanding of people and why they do what they do has always been its more traditional definition, because other approaches, research approaches, find it very difficult to get to that. So that's at its heart what purpose it serves for clients, and that deeper understanding of humans and why they behave in the way they do. But there's a qualitative skill set which is quite specific, which is around how we think, how we notice, how we observe, how we inquire, how we are curious, which are a sort of set of skills that mean that if you employ or bring in a qualitative person, they will bring those capabilities to any challenge you have. So it's not necessarily about the thing you do, it's about how you do it. And I think that's the skill set that will see us forward into the future, I think.
Okay. Let's start first of all with you. So how did you get into qualitative research? I've noticed, I've just looked at your LinkedIn and noticed you actually started in marketing and then presumably moved across for some reason.
Yes, I did. Well, it's, I think most researchers often, or most qualitative researchers often say, I didn't grow up wanting to be a qualitative researcher. I did do research, market research diploma as part of my degree. So I had this sort of sense of I wanted to do some kind of research. And then I started applying for jobs after university, did a degree in consumer sciences, and came across a small recruitment agency. Actually, it was a recruitment agency that I found my first job in qualitative. And I was sitting there having the conversation about what I wanted to do, and the guy in the next room worked for a marketing consultancy, and he heard me laugh. And he said, I'm interested in that. So I met him, got the job, but I still then didn't really know what qualitative research was. I just knew I was going to be working for a marketing consultancy and that I was going to be a research assistant for the guy who was the head of research. And so it was a new product development consultancy, and we did a lot of research. So I saw some of the best qualitative researchers at the time working at work, if you like. I saw Wendy from RDSI, I saw lady from BJM, and Bill Schlackman, and I can remember thinking, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. So then the rest is history. I just then moved into work with Schlackmans and earned my stripes, did lots of groups, carried on being a qualitative researcher about 10 years, and then moved on to Asia, where I led a few teams there for a couple of years, then came back, ran my own qual business, did that for 10 years. And then after that, decided I think I've got a career left in me. So I joined Synovate again back in Asia. So that's when we first met.
What was it about what they were doing that you thought, that's what I want to do?
Well, you get paid to be curious about people.
That's true.
And it's like, I mean, you could say you get paid to be nosy, but you get paid to be curious. Curiosity is a better word, probably. So, people are, eminently interesting, why they do what they do. But if you are a people person and just enjoy engaging with people, it's a perfect job, because you spend your whole time having really interesting conversations with people about themselves, about their lives. So you're always learning something new. And of course, whenever you learn something new about somebody else and why they do what they do, or their perspective on life, it actually makes you a better person, because you're constantly listening and putting yourself into somebody else's shoes. And that gives you a really broad and interesting perspective on life. So I think that's what started me in it. That's what's kept me in it, kept me going. So I've always tried to keep that aspect alive. And then when you get more senior, you tend, in my case, I have moved away from the day-to-day doing, and more. It's more for me now about spending time helping to inspire others to do, and to help others to do, and to encourage others to do. But that, again, is still about people. It's still about going out and helping people and supporting people. So, yeah, it is the people.
When I was in Singapore, it had never dawned on me until I got there that people that did qualitative research in Asia were not usually the locals, and therefore did not moderate. That was a complete revelation to me.
Yes, yeah.
Did you miss that aspect, or was that?
Well, no. Actually, it was funny, because in Singapore I was very lucky, because in Singapore they speak English. It's the national language, and so I did moderate. Not the second time I was out there, but the first time I was out there. I did moderate, and that was really interesting culturally, because I would always go in and have this foreigner's view, which gave me an excellent perspective on asking stupid questions. One of the stupidest questions I remember asking was, I was doing a group with pregnant women, and it was about I think it was about infant formula or something. I said to them, so everybody, so you're just about coming to, not far from the baby's coming. So are you all planning to go back to work, or, what are you thinking of doing? With my very, Western perspective of some people give up work, some people go back to work. And of course they all were like, what? Of course we're going back to work. That's what we do. So that was fascinating. But then there is the barrier, because you cannot lapse into the Hokkien or the Cantonese or their local dialect, and so there is always a formality that exists between a local and an expat, and so you don't do it all the time, obviously. And so how it works is. You end up working a lot through simultaneous translators. You will be providing the thinking in the background to the teams who you're usually training. So they will be listening to your guidelines on how to probe this, how to ask this, what to cover. And then you will observe through a simultaneous translator. And then you will work with the moderator, who's actually done the focus groups, to help them, bring the answer to the client. So it is a sort of a, vicarious role, really. You've got somebody else doing the work, but you bring a different value then. It's not about the doing, it's about the coaching, the learning and the thinking and the analysis, and then the strategic insights you bring as a result.
Because I wondered whether having worked like that almost equipped you for the sort of brave new world of Qual, where presumably moving forward, far less groups are going to be moderated, and it's going to be a lot more reliant on maybe even AI and NLP and things like that. I just wondered if that sort of being one step removed, which you were in Asia, almost helped you adjust to what's happening now.
Yeah, I think if you go back to the core of it, the job of the qualitative researcher isn't really just about those engagements with the human beings where you're trying to elicit some information. Because at the end of the day, the client comes to you because they want to understand something about their business challenge. They want to understand why people do what they do in order that they can then make a better brand, ad, product, service, or whatever. And so your job is to think about what that person wants and then make the translation into, what it is that therefore the client can or should do. And so the data sources are less relevant, and they've become less and less relevant as time has gone on in terms of the specific data source, as long as you have good quality data to work with. It's turning the data, whether it's the transcript or the big data or the, whether it's from AI, into meaning for the client. And so that you're right, having that kind of, I couldn't be the person collecting the data in Singapore, but now I don't have to be actually collecting the data at all, because I can look at this community, I can pick up some stuff here, I can look at that big data analysis there, and then I can triangulate those 3 or 4 things together, because that's how I think, and then make it into meaning for the client.
Do you think that means that it's almost easier for somebody to move, say, from quantitative research to qualitative research? Because in the end, it's all about curiosity and way of thinking rather than about those more technical.
Yeah, I do. And I've had this discussion actually with a few colleagues, as you'd imagine, and with others in the industry, is what does it mean as we move into this virtual world, which we have had to move into in the last 6 months, for what have been our core skills, which are rapport building, which are trust, which are empathy, etc. I also, that said, so I feel you're absolutely right. If we take it to that next conclusion, if you've got a curious mind and you're a good analytical thinker and you've got a good business brain and you can look beneath the data to understand sort of the why behind the what, which can be revealed using these virtual techniques as well. It's not like you have to be face to face to get to the why. You can get to that in another way. You could still do the job of the qualitative researcher. But I feel there is something about that human interaction that qualitative researchers are well known for, that we all know has another dimension beyond just the words that are spoken. Because we've all been devoid of much human interaction ourselves over the past 6 months. We all know how a Zoom conversation with your family is not the same as the real thing. And so it's very similar to the world of the qualitative researcher who has been denied that opportunity to go and spend 3 hours with someone in their home and just look around and listen and have an engaging conversation and just pick up on that stuff that somebody didn't tell you because they didn't think it was important, but you noticed it because you were there, and actually that's the insight that you're going to go away with. So there is something very rich and powerful in that, and there's also the qualitative researcher's ability, having been there, to then bring that story to life for the client. through a human being. Because clients, even though they've got all the data in the world, they still have to be able to relate to the insight that you shared with them. So when you've done all your analysis and your interpretation, if you can bring a great video or a great story of a human being, that's the bit the client will remember. And that's the bit the client will connect to the data, and that will then help them make the decision. So I think it's it's still a bit of both.
Okay, all right. So great future for people making videos then. I was going to make brand names for a minute.
Yes. No, but I think video is definitely the way forward for this. I mean, nobody has any time to read a 20, 30, 50 page PowerPoint deck anymore. And so we're seeing a lot more of our deliverables being told through video, being told through video stories with sketches and narratives, etc. So yeah, I think that's one of the big shifts we will see going forward.
Okay. I know, because I've been trying to talk to you and you've said, oh, I'm incredibly busy. And it strikes me that there are some qualitative researchers I've been talking to who've said exactly the same. They're really busy. And then you speak to some other qualitative agencies and they, are really struggling at the moment. So how come half of you are really busy and the other half haven't got enough to do? What's going on?
Okay, so a few sort of hypotheses about that. So the first point of busyness was very much around the pivot from face-to-face to virtual. So some agencies had already started to move to communities and online platforms to do some of their qualitative research, but were often using it in a complementary way. But not many were doing virtual focus groups, like Zoom focus groups. If you were doing a focus group, you would be doing that face-to-face. So first of all, we have to learn a new skill set, as well as keep the business going. So there's a new skill set which comes, with any technology, it comes with its benefits and its challenges. And how to, form, norm, storm, and perform, which is what you do in a focus group, online is a different skill set, and we need to learn those different skill sets. So I think that's the first thing, that the pivot has been a challenge for many qualitative researchers. I think the second thing is we're noticing that we're doing more projects for the same amount of money. So the projects have got smaller, and so that means that to continue to build your business or to have your business, you have to actually work harder, because the smaller the projects are, the more you have to do. So you have to do more projects in the same amount of time, and that is taking its toll on those who are busy. We're also finding that clients are struggling too. So clients are struggling because their budgets are struggling, they're vulnerable because they're in businesses that may or may not be doing so well. And so they're under pressure. So that makes every piece of research they do extremely important. And it means that you then have to put a lot more energy into each project just to make sure everything is going to plan with that client and it's going to deliver exactly what they need. So I think there's been an intensity around the projects that we have that we haven't seen as much in the past. So that's what, and I think there are also, there are a lot of people, I think budgets are tighter, so clients aren't spending as freely, and that's an obvious thing. And so when that happens, you have to fight a lot harder for everything you go for, which again is both time intensive and it makes it more difficult. So there are lots of layers to that question, I think.
Okay. And then moving on, so this brave new world, I mean, doing groups by Zoom, is that going to last? It doesn't sound the ideal way of doing a group for me.
Well, it's very funny because there have been quite a lot of clients who've been very reluctant in different markets, and it depends on the market and how how traditionally minded clients are. Some clients do believe, no, it's got to be a focus group and I've got to be there. And so, well, I'm sorry, it won't be the same if everyone's wearing a mask and they're all behind perspex. And how are you going to build rapport and warmth and openness in that environment? But that said,
No wine.
sorry?
No wine.
No wine, no wine, exactly. So that's actually a British thing, or a British thing. We don't even do that in the UK so much anymore, which is sad. So what's happened is when we have, for example, we've experimented a lot, obviously, and there was one example in Germany, which was one of the earliest markets to open up, where we started doing a focus group with some perspex glass between and masks, and so everybody felt safe, and the client was going, this is not right. This is not going to give me what I feel I need. So let's go virtual. So they then, having been very resistant, went to a virtual focus group, and actually were very happy, because you don't do them with 8 people, obviously. You do them with 4 people. You have smaller numbers. You have to work a lot harder at rapport building at the beginning, get people to speak about something personally, build human interactions between the people. But then the conversation starts to flow, just as you find on a Zoom call. You find your rhythm, you find your way of making a conversation. You probably have to gamify it a little bit more, put a few Mentimeter quizzes in there so that people keep engaged, and it's not just as one long narrative. It mustn't feel like a set of Q&As. So as I say, there are lots of techniques there. And so some clients have actually really enjoyed that because they've felt part of it. And so sometimes clients have actually been there, not talking with the group, but they've felt more with the people rather than behind the glass, which of course they were before. So that's been a revelation. So in some countries, Poland, for example, they our team in Poland absolutely love the virtual environment, and they're kind of going, well, do we really need to go back to face-to-face now? Because our clients are loving it, we're loving it, we can do it from home. So it depends. I think the proof comes in what you get out of it. Yes, you're right, it's not the same. But then is it significantly worse that it means that you don't get the quality? And I think, as with all things, if you have good moderation, if you have good participants, if you allow the conversation to flow, then you will get some pretty good stuff out.
Okay, and what about other techniques? What else has changed? Because a lot is changing anyway, in fact.
So COVID I think just accelerated the change that was on its way. So I think the first change that happened really was sort of back in the 90s, when we started to move away from just face-to-face and the more kind of academic focus groups and one-on-ones, very kind of prescriptive in a either in home or in a facility, and then we started to get out there. We started to engage with people in the real world, whether that was in homes or ethnography and things like that. So that was the sort of first big thing. And then of course technology came, and we started to be able to engage with people on on a platform, or I think video focus groups, just by typing, sort of came and went in a bit of a puff of smoke and mirrors, and they're useless. So they came and went. But the platform, being able to speak with people asynchronously, so people come and go throughout the period of a week or 2 weeks. And then, of course, now they're able to upload pictures and upload stories and go back and check something. And so you have this longitudinal relationship with people. That helps as well. And then of course, as soon as you got the iPhone, then there was ability to use apps and have conversations with people in real time when they're out and about. Oh, let's when you're actually out and about having a pret-a-manger, let's hear about your experience. So you could do it in real life. So a lot of that was happening already. But I think I think the biggest thing is probably the move towards communities and to these sort of longitudinal, and move towards even longer term communities where you actually have the same community of people for a year or 18 months, and you dip in and out of conversations with them over that period of time. So you build a relationship with them. They are intrinsically engaged with you over that period of time, and you do both qual and quant work with them. So you hear their stories, you do your same kind of in-depth explorations about the why, but then you will also dip in and do some big measures with them as well. So that's actually, so that's again, not new to qual, but because it's qual and quant, you know, we see that as a big sort of shift moving forward. And I think clients are less worried than they used to be. This is globally now. Markets may differ, but less worried about, oh, it's qual this or it's qual that. I'm actually very interested in the answer to my business question. And, you know, you tell me how you want to go about doing that. And so, okay, so we need some qual, we need some quant, we need to get a total picture. And so we're feeling that blending between qual and quant happening in order to help clients. So it's not about us and what we do. It's about how we get what we get in order to then deliver a great outcome for the client.
So do you think it's possible then that in 10 years' time, UU won't exist because there won't be that differentiation between qual and quant? It will be much more about perhaps markets or the sort of question rather than the technique. Yes,
and it's very interesting because it's like all these things come around again. I worked in the 90s in the 80s for P. Graham Walters, and they were very, you know, we all do everything here. You know, we do qual, we do quant, and it's all about understanding the client's question. And so I sort of do sense that we're moving a little bit back into that territory again. But I also, I don't know whether this is just me, because I really do believe in the skill set, that it is quite particular, the ability to build rapport and the ability to really pull something out of somebody and then translate that into meaning to help the client. And I still feel that skill set will be relevant. Whether it will be called qual or not, I don't know, you know, but I think, so what I've seen recently, for example, is a lot more emphasis on storytelling, a lot more emphasis on facilitation and helping things to move forward. And qualitative people are great at that because they notice, they pick up the stories, they, you know, they can facilitate groups of people. And so that's possibly the role that we will also play, as opposed to just being data gatherers in a qualitative way.
So actually then you think the future for qualitative research is very bright, albeit organisations are going to have to change, and that's why there's a bit of turmoil going on at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's bright because there is never a more important time than now, particularly to understand the human emotion and the human psyche, because we are in that shifting place at the moment. And you do that by having those human interactions, listening to those stories, getting to the emotion, not just the rational, and the things that people won't tell you immediately because they don't trust you, and then they'll tell you later on what they really feel. That's what qualitative does better than anything else. So will that cease to be of relevance to the client, you know, in 5 years' time? You know, hopefully not, because clients will still want to hear the stories of the people who tell us, who have the stories to tell. And I think so it is about, you know, translation of stories rather than digging for depth, you know, so it's probably going to have a different purpose with clients than perhaps it did in the past.
And what about AI and NLP and all of that sort of thing? That seems to be a real buzzword that sort of talking about.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to be an important thing in the future? Do you even think that's part of qualitative?
Yeah, well, it is, because it helps you do what you do more efficiently, because we've toyed with it in some of our community work, which of course, you know, when you're doing a community, either short or a long-term community, you have maybe, I don't know, anything between 50 and 500 people telling stories online, you know, typing things in.
Oh yes.
No idea. Yeah, some of these communities are very big. and for qualitative,
Yeah.
particularly if they're longer term. And actually the qual-quant communities are even bigger than that, 2,000 or 3,000, because they're not all answering every question every time. So they're a community who are there to be engaged, but not on every single week. So a huge amount of unstructured data is generated, and so you need to have a more efficient way of doing it. So old school qualitative was transcripts, content analysis sheet, all that kind of thing.
500 people, that's not going to work, really.
Exactly. Whereas you can actually get a lot of analysis done if you've got the right program and the right software to cut through some of those bigger data masses and create some essential meaning out of it, some patterns. Then the question is, who goes from the patterns and the themes to connect them together to make meaning for the client? And I think that's where we will still have our role to play.
Okay, thank you. You have been amazingly informative. I'm sure that qualitative researchers, particularly those that are looking at it now, will find this absolutely fascinating. You would suggest still go for qualitative research if that's what you want to do as a young qualitative researcher. You still think that's a great career?
Yeah, I think it's a great career. I think the only thing that will stop us is if we don't keep moving forward and don't keep thinking about possibility and options, because things have changed and it's very easy to stay within your comfort zone. But if we keep minded of our skill set, which is the curiosity, the listening, the analytical thinking, the connections, making meaning, and sell that not just to clients, but to our own people, the value of that in today's world, then that's the only thing that'll hold us back if we don't keep banging our own drum and saying how valuable that is.
To be honest, that's true of so many industries at the moment, isn't it? We've all evolved.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So it's accepting, and it's taking that with a sort of curious mindset and a challenging mindset, and let's take this opportunity to shake things up a bit, because actually maybe there were some things before that weren't quite as good as they could have been. So maybe this is our chance to make them better.
Okay, Sue, thank you very much. It's been a wonderful chatting to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Liz. I've really enjoyed it myself.